Welcome everybody to the Santa Cruz Software Labs podcast. My name is Mendes. I'm the Director of Content Integration Solutions at Santa Cruz Software. Today we're going to be discussing the hidden costs of ineffective creative workflows. And I've brought together a panel of experienced professionals who've worked in the industry for many, many years. And we'll go through some quick introductions. And I think we'll start with John.
Hi, I'm John Florence. I am Director of Content Strategies at Rise Time, small consulting firm based out of Chicago. We specialize in digital asset management and content management. I've been at Rise Time 10 years. I've been in digital asset management coming up on 18 years, and I've been in general production management, workflows, the, the majority of my career going back decades.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Yeah, so I am the solution architect and the founder of SignGate. SignGate it started as a digital asset management services company. We were implementing mostly a specific vendor, OpenText, but then we diversified to implement different DAM solutions. But recently we also implemented a integration platform for the DAM space or content space in general. And I've been in the DAM space for about 26 years now. I started as a professional services employee at a vendor and then started SignGate in 2007. And it has been a long time in that.
Awesome, Ron.
Yeah, I'm Ron Desjardins. I'm a Senior Director of Creative Operations. I've been working in creative operations for the better part of 25 years at this point. Really at the nexus of helping creative organizations produce content and marketing deliverables. So really the production processes, the workflows, et cetera, to do that. I also oversee project management organizations in those organizations, and then I have been involved with a number of DAM deployments. Currently involved with a DXP, CMP, and DAM deployment in my current role, and so always trying to bridge the gap and understand how we deploy these tools and systems into these organizations for efficiency and productivity gains. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for participating. Really appreciate it. I think your experiences will really bring kind of like a wide swath of kind of feedback and input that I think will be really important to the conversation. So this particular podcast isn't going to focus necessarily on the creative aspect of things, but more so kind of like the mechanics that kind of live underneath, right? So we really want to get into those like invisible little leaks that end up costing companies more money because of the inefficiencies that may exist. There's no shortage of data points out there, but one of the interesting ones that I came across is that creative teams lose somewhere between 25 to 35% of their time effectively working on things that are non-creative tasks. I'm curious to know if that's also kind of your experience based on your clients or your own employees, or did that sound about right? I mean, 25 to 35 sounds relatively high if you think about, your a 40-hour week or whatever it might be. But has that been your experience, John?
I think it sounds low. We did a implementation. Really, the first project I worked on with Ballant was a large CPG in the Midwest. And one of the first things we did was create an infographic to kind of introduce the organization to the dam we were planning to install. And one of the numbers that came out of there was I'm going off memory, but people were spending an average of about 40 minutes trying to find logos for specific products around the organization, finding the right person who had the most up to date. And that was, I think the linchpin that got all the brands on board to say, hey, we need to have everything in a centralized location to attack that 40-minute, obviously turn that into a minute or so It wasn't the only inefficiency, but I think it was kind of the keystone number that helped the organization get on board.
Interesting. Bulan, do you find the same?
Yeah, it's about the same.
Okay.
It's not just the findability of content, the time spent on that search, but also trying to follow certain file naming conventions, placing stuff into the right folders, making sure that you check the check boxes on all these project management solutions, all these extra kind of overhead that they have to do is taking a lot of time, and the mistakes that happen along the way. I know that at least a recent discussion about a packaging person trying to put together a package, they have to collect the existing assets from the dam, collect from an archaic system product information, and then another spreadsheet that has all the packaging information and also the instructions from the workflow tools. They have to put that all together to be able to start working on one creative
Wow.
piece of packaging content.
Wow. Wow. That's interesting. You think that wouldn't be the case anymore in 2026, but I think it's valuable for others to probably hear that that's still prevalent, or it still exists, right? We haven't solved for everything, I guess, is kind of the thing there. Ron, what's your experience? More or less the same?
Yeah, I think more or less the same. I think a lot in my current organization, we've gotten feedback that designers and writers feel like they're doing too much project management work up front. Like, I have to read this brief and it's missing information, and then I have to chase that down with the stakeholder. And so I think it starts right at intake and the quality of what's coming in, and then as it filters through the actual production work, that, as Bulan noted, like, there's all these little side steps that certainly add time to the process. So.
Interesting. We'll circle back on this, but is there a sense that the executives in those companies understand that readily or right off the bat, or is it just kind of it is what it is? Just out of curiosity, we'll dig into this a little bit more. But in your experience, is it something that they bring forth to you as kind of like, I'm pretty sure we're not leveraging the designers to their maximum capabilities because they're spending more time doing this, or is that more so at the user level where the designers are coming forth and saying, I'm not leveraging my time?
I think you'll hear it more from the actual designers and writers. I think the executive focus is more on, like, how do we get more out of this team, and why does this take so long? And they don't really comprehend, like, all the details that's part of that process. So I think there's certainly more education to be done with those executives in some cases. So.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Bulan, you brought up folders, and that made me think immediately of kind of, I guess the term is like a redundancy loop, right? So how often do you still find today the same artifact having been produced for different campaigns or by different individuals, kind of sitting in a different folder on different network drives or whatever it may be? Like, how common is it to still today run into this existence of redundant work that isn't being managed, or groups that aren't even aware of the fact that it's even happening? Like, how common is that?
Everywhere. I don't think nobody solved that problem.
No.
Because everybody wants to stick to the folders all the time, and and even applications are forcing people. We're just doing a migration, and the new application they are moving into is forcing everything to be in a folder. And now people who work without folders are now thinking, okay, now I have to figure out, where do I put this thing? And I'm pretty sure they'll put it in the wrong places every single time. And then because they don't see it there, they will recreate it, or they will say, oh, it doesn't exist. Let me open a new ticket to create this one. So this happens everywhere. Even I will confess that in our SharePoint, it happens all the time also, right? For documents. It doesn't, once you have the folders, you corner yourself into that little deep dark hole.
So there's still this culture of, if it's easy to just do it this way, I'll just do it my own way. I'll just go about it my own way to solve for the problem and kind of complete the task at hand. John, you still finding that in clients where not that they're going rogue, but people are just trying to be effective in their job and kind of get to the finish line and check a box and say they're done. Like, is that still a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to combine two things, something Ron said and something Balan said. You know, um, I think that nobody gets evaluated on their yearly evaluation for how well they use the dam or how often they use the dam. You know, they typically have a full time job as a designer or copy editor or whatever their marketer that is utilizing those assets that come out of there. It's not the use of that. So they're not incentive. I find people are not incentivized to follow the use case user stories that have been developed. The other thing is, organizations tend to view the dam as I was using a shared file server or SharePoint or Dropbox or some other peer-to-peer folder-based system. They want to put it in the dam and they want to just move that to a different platform, still rely on that folder-based structure, and they get caught in this two-dimensional hierarchy that folders have to follow, but most businesses are not two-dimensional, right? You might start something like with a design brief, but by the time that project gets completed, it typically goes out to multiple places through distribution, gets reused multiple times. So businesses are not hierarchical or linear, um, but for whatever reason, our brains, because of decades of training, have taught us to store things in linear organizational structures, and it sort of becomes self-limiting. And then as people get frustrated with that, they go rogue.
Right. Interesting. So have you encountered a situation where where it wasn't the folder structure, it was more kind of a systemic problem where it was implementation, it was workflow, it was process, it was just, this is the way we've always done it, like those scenarios where the folder structure isn't the only thing that's creating the issue for these companies when it comes to inefficiency?
Yeah, and I would I would argue that a, a well done implementation of a dam is typically we take their existing process, we we adapt it to this new technology, this new platform. They use it for a while, then the organization kind of has a wake up call and they start seeing the features in the new platform that allow them to, restructure their process, and then they sort of become self improving. I would say, I think any good consultant who's honest would say probably see that less than half the time. I think because of the incentives that people have of getting their job done, it's really hard for organizations to self improve unless they unless that kind of continuous improvement mentality is part of their culture. I my bottom line is culture drives success or failure of these platforms more than anything else. I mean, a bad configuration or bad technology can prevent you
Mm-hmm.
from being successful, but more often than not, it's more inherent to the organization whether they're going to make it or not.
Interesting. Bulan, you got a take on that?
Yeah, I think as John was saying it, I started thinking about a common customer that we have with them.
No
And
names.
no names
No
here,
names, no names.
but the fact that continuous improvement wasn't there, or the continuous ownership wasn't there, especially no governance around the system, they keep on failing and having to step back up and then fail again when resources change. So that continuous improvement should be part of a framework where people are constantly documenting what they are uh, deciding in the dam as processes, uh, how things should be operated, and then on top of that, getting feedback from all the stakeholders, constantly putting that into a kind of a machine that will produce better results, try them out, document them, and then go ask for more feedback and keep on doing that. That's the only way they can keep the system up and running. Because if that machine stops, then you see the damn system becoming, oh, it's outdated, oh, it doesn't work, oh, the search is not working. It's not that. Almost all damn systems are about the same. Oh, the technology is now caught up everywhere in terms of functionality. So I think it's the culture, as you said, John, and that framework, getting that organizational structure in place that makes everything go smooth.
Awesome. Awesome. Ron, similar takes?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting as I'm right in the middle of standing up a platform such as this and utilizing consultants like John and Bulan. And certainly this is the first time this organization has a system like this. And so we're coming from my current company came from actually two companies merging almost 2 years ago. And those different design teams and organizations had their own servers, own platforms that they were just saving their working files on. And so in the past 6 months and until about a month ago, I finally consolidated all that into a singular SharePoint location just to get people organized around that. And so that alone took months of, change management with the team, getting them comfortable, coming up with, consistent naming processes in a basic file organization. And then as we're standing up the dam, it's the same thing where I'm trying to really balance the need for some level of folders and some level of letting the metadata drive findability and searchability, et cetera. So yeah, I just think it's inherent in all these organizations. Just trying to overcome the established way we do things is, probably the biggest challenge we have.
Awesome. So it sounds like culture is definitely one of the biggest contributors. So to what extent do you think ownership is, in terms of identifying ownership? Is that up there too? Do you think one unbalances the other, one's bigger than the other? Or is it all kind of case by case?
I think, you need to have a strong owner who's going to drive the platforms at this level inside the organization, and whether they're working with external consultants or whatnot, but somebody who has a strong point of view internally and knows how to navigate with all the right stakeholders to really explain, why we should, propose solutions and pick a direction and follow through and try to, support the way the business operates. So it really takes somebody who I think has a deep understanding of this is the business need, and this is how we anticipate this solution solving that need, and then being able to sell and manage that internally. So I think I don't know if organizations clearly define that true owner, and I'm sure Relat and John have more insights there. In my current role, that I've been identified as that owner, and so I'm taking that. But I think in some organizations, for sure, you may have multiple teams who think oh, is Dan part of the technology team? Oh, but they have a creative leader who maybe is touching it, or vice versa. So I think that's, understanding who that owner is as early as possible is really critical to ensuring success.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Bulan, so from an ownership standpoint, understanding who that your owner is probably makes you try and implement change a lot easier, I should say, right?
Right.
Have you found situations where there's no clear owner in a professional company where it seems like there's some ambiguity between who's perhaps paying for the technology versus who's actually maintaining and implementing the technology? And do you ever run into a situation where those two things don't align?
Yeah, it happens when especially IT is the designated owner.
Yep.
And they are paying for it, but they take it as an IT implementation project where it's all about the technology. Let's get the certificates in place. Let's get this SSO in place. Those are not the important things, right? That's really, okay, it's going to happen. But IT focuses on those, but there is no championing within the company, there is no also knowledge of the key players that can champion for you within the creative teams, the marketing groups. So that almost doubles or triples our work when we are implementing the solution. And you almost know that when you're out the door after the implementation, that's going to die. Nobody's going to own it. IT is going to say open a ticket, right? It doesn't happen that way, right? It needs to be owned by people who have a big stake in that game also. They need to understand the consequences of not maintaining that. It's not just IT saying that, okay, we had this budget, we used it to implement it, that's it, right? That's what I've seen in many places. It's changing a little bit because of maybe movement to the SaaS is also allowing marketing teams to be more owners, or creative teams to become more owners, and move away from the IT ownership. So that has been helping a little bit. But then you get sometimes you see that people get slapped by IT saying that, well, how can you pick this system up? You didn't even tell us, right? When the first issue happens, is now they start the blame game. So dynamics are changing a little bit, but it's getting more ownership on the marketing side, especially. That's what I'm seeing.
Gotcha. So, John, so relative to IT's involvement in procurement and possible kind of sales interactions, how difficult is it to get them to understand the value of a dam? What relative to it not being, it's not about cost per terabyte really. The value isn't in like storage per se, especially if IT is involved, kind of like what Bulan said, right? Where the value really comes to how well it gets implemented in place within the marketing or creative team. But if IT is involved, it tends to be more of a very kind of a binary black and white. It's good or it's bad. What's the cost per terabyte, gigabyte, whatever it is. So how do you balance that out in your discussions and talking about the technology and trying to convey the value that's really trying to be delivered?
Yeah. So I maybe a poor analogy I'd use. I used to work in a building in Chicago where if you needed to get to the 35th floor, you had to go up to the like 45th floor and then come down to get to your floor. And DAM is kind of the same way, like Balan's saying, when it's viewed as an IT project, right? It's got two things working for it and working against it. From a business perspective, they're probably just looking at it as infrastructure, kind of like email. It just has to work, and that that's what they envision. And they'll have to do some UAT maybe. But from an IT perspective, it's viewed as a project, so it's got a start and stop date, a budget, a timeline, and that's how it's going to be measured as success. And really, the project is a minor component. It really should be viewed as a program. And I was fortunate in the first time I got involved in DAM and I became the owner, I got moved from the business into IT. Not because I was an IT person. I mean, I was technical enough to be in IT, but more importantly, some of the VPs in IT had collaborated with some of the business owners and the intellectual property owners, and they saw the value in the dam as solving some strategic issues that existed at the C level in the company. And to me, that was most important because they saw the dam as an enabler for strategies that they had, going out 5 years plus, where I think, I still, to this day, I work on a lot of SaaS dam implementations. And a lot of times it's sort of put in this bucket of a necessary piece of infrastructure so that my marketing team can all collaborate and, kind of like a SharePoint plus, instead of seeing it as part of their strategy for hitting organizational goals. And I think that's good or bad. That's a tough part in our business sometimes. When we start implementing, we know because we don't have that executive sponsorship, we don't have those conversations with the business about, what are the business drivers and the business metrics versus what are the individual metrics and say departmental metrics. Organizations that really succeed in the dam space tend to view this as, part of their strategy versus just a necessary component.
When it comes to the price of an implementation, the price of the technology, obviously executives are immediately going to think KPIs. And nowadays, with AI becoming what it is, and it playing a role in kind of like throughput and numbers of outputs, things like that, tend to be a big KPI. But is that really a good telltale indicator of like a good system or a good implementation? Like Boulant, is that the bigger the number, the better it is? Is that accurate at all?
No, it's not. It's there is not really correlation except when the money is spent in the right places, right? If there is no dam manager, for example, that they hired, they said we can put the best system out there, but we are not going to hire anyone to manage this. Then again, the dam system is going to fail. Uh, it is all based on making sure the implementation matches the size of the organization that is going to benefit from this. Not this, it can be a huge company, but a small group might be using it. So that's a different story there. But it's all about sizing it correctly, putting the money in the right place. Otherwise, you can spend a ton of money and it may not even go live. Right? I've seen those type of things also when people say, "Yeah, we spent too much money. I don't think this is working," and they pull the plug because there wasn't any owner. There was no single person who's going to take that and continue to manage it also. So it's important to plan well, size it well, and then put the money accordingly. So money is like the third, fourth step where you start putting dollar signs next to your plan, right? Each individual item in your plan.
It's interesting because I'm curious to understand how many companies out there understand kind of the value of an asset, right, or the utilization rate, right, or the time, the content, and then the usage of that asset relative to what its value was to produce, and then what value was brought in by it. I've had somebody bring up kind of the lifetime value of an asset, and as it relates to creatives, they're dedicating time, effort, strategy, all of that to kind of pull together assets. And it seems as though AI flooding the market with value or flooding the dam with assets doesn't necessarily equate to better returns, especially if the metadata is not there, especially if the data is not there to be tracked later on. But is anyone doing that well? Have you seen anybody do that well relative to like attributing value to assets that are either in the dam or in storage? Are they doing it through workflow? Are they doing it through technology that they inherently have? Are they looking to do it with AI now that AI is in play? Anyone have any insight on that?
I have an opinion on that because you were saying that, and this is something I struggle with to articulate with our clients or potential clients. One of the questions that comes up, and it's kind of jarring from a timing perspective. You go through a kind of a courtship where they decide if they want to work with you as a partner, select a system, implement it, it goes live, you're 6 months into it, and then they come and say, "Oh, I need an ROI on the system. I need to know the value of these assets that I just spent all the money on." And, we're supposed to retrofit that back in the organization. And I think, and I'll give credit to Belant a little bit on this from working with him on some projects with some of his products where we're not just focused on the dam, we might be focused on the PIM, ERP system, packaging systems, which are separate. It really isn't the value of the asset itself. It's a value the value in the asset comes from how the business is able to utilize it. You know, um, and I can be brutally honest about this sometimes. I've done some really remarkable implementations with Ballant that we were just really proud of, and because of a change in leadership halfway around the world, the whole system got deleted, right? Because they didn't. It's not what they had in mind. They wanted something they originated tied to their success. It's painful to see 5 years of work just go down the drain, but it's kind of a wake up call that the value of those assets were really only there as long as the organization was going to utilize them and get a return on them in the marketplace, either through, communications, however the organization succeeds. And that's a tough one, because as a dam vendor doing the implementation, we're just not at a level where we can always see that clearly. That's where that sponsor really comes in and really helps. Because if you can start tying the long-term success of the organization to the dam, then the organization will kind of carry it forward versus relying on us to kind of backfill that justification, because it's not really the way it should roll out.
Interesting. Ron, you're more like at that grassroots level with the designers and managing the people that are hands-on. Like, is the sentiment that they'd like to have more understanding of kind of the value of the things that they produce? I've heard designers just have no general sense. Like, they're executing a request, it goes away, but they never reap the benefit of knowing that not only was it a good design, but it actually was extremely beneficial to either a campaign or a company. That affects culture, I'd imagine, too, right?
Yeah, that's been a common thread at every organization I've worked at is, we'll produce a paid media campaign, we hand it off to the paid media team, and then they never know how it performed, when it was sent out, is it still running, is it retired? And then those teams that are using those assets are so busy with, their spend management and placements and all that, they're not reporting back to the organization. And if they are reporting back, it's mainly on the financial performance of those assets, right? It's never really a creative assessment or test. So I think that's been a constant challenge. And I don't know that there are good systems to do that or that even those teams leveraging those assets are able to report on a creative level, like the value of this thing. It's interesting with AI and, the leveraging AI to create more written content. And really the focus has become in the past 6 months, AEO, SEO driven measurement. And that's really, around flooding the market with written content that appears in searches and whatnot. So I think there's beginning to be a lot more executive oversight of that to understand like how much of this content is moving the needle for our business needs. And I think, the role of DAM in there is, I think somewhat mixed depending on the organization and how that content is being served out to the target audiences and whatnot. But certainly I think there's growing awareness of, hey, it's great we can produce more, but is it slop? And, is that, what's the value of that? And, we need to improve that. I've seen, in the past 3 months, I've seen certain executives like be able to say like speed. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we need speed and quality. And so I think, that will become an emerging theme, especially as AI is really embedded in everything.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. The level of understanding, though, I think is still fairly clouded based on what I'm seeing relative to like executive understanding of what AI means to specifically to creative workflows when it comes to the technology space, right? There's this grand kind of theme of AI will fix it, in air quotes. Yeah. What does that mean? So sure, you can create a lot of assets. That might be a good thing, but essentially, to your point, Ron, right? Garbage in is garbage out, right? So if you have 30,000 assets instead of the 3,000 that you might produce annually internally with creatives, do those matter at all if A, you can't find them, and B, you can't have any, or you can't apply any attribution to them that would make them contextually valuable to a campaign or to a company, or to an initiative? Is garbage in, garbage out still kind of a thing today? Are you finding people that have stood up dams when those corners are cut, things start to fall apart, and then for those who don't understand what's happening, they start to blame the technology when it might not be the technology, it might be the process. And then do they also understand, and do you guys have to kind of bring this to the table, that this is where AI can shine in this one facet of this one thing, as opposed to it's not a catch-all, solve-all for everything with one, swoop of the hand, as opposed to being like AI is very good at doing X, Y, Z. I think AI tagging as a whole is it's kind of a given at this point. It's kind of old news, right? I think most DAM systems nowadays have some flavor of AI tagging. Some may be more rudimentary than others. But if you guys have to kind of walk people down this path of understanding that AI is not going to be this catch-all for everything, it's not going to solve everything, but there are facets of this digital workflow where it has a place and it does add value while still supporting kind of the creative workflow, right? So you could potentially be taking workload and redundancy off of the plate of designers or marketers, whoever it may be, that may not be interested in doing that, let's say, or may not be particularly good at it either, right? So you have to have the discussions when it comes to AI and its responsibility or its capability in an environment like this.
I think there's lofty expectations for AI to
Well
just
put.
produce things at scale with minimal human oversight, right? And I'm constantly feeling like I'm reminding people like there's no magic button yet. Maybe in some cases, if you want to create a photo, an image, a video clip, if you can write a good prompt, you can get there. But I think if you're talking about good design or good writing, you need quality input in there. I think the human in the loop is still critical at this point in time. And I think there's just a lot of sort of mythology out there around like, oh, this team, eliminated half their designers and AI is doing it at the press of a button. And I think it's always good to be a little skeptical of like what's actually happening in those situations.
Yeah.
John Beelan, I'm sure you're hearing similar.
Yeah. Where are you guys seeing AI really deliver? You guys get some prime examples of where AI has been implemented in some facet where it's like really, really delivering at this point, kind of the expectation?
I think I'm going to defer to Belant on this because I have not seen anyone truly leverage AI effectively. I mean, there are incremental benefits to it, generating keywords and things like that.
Sure.
On import and kind of what I would characterize more as machine learning stuff, with OCR and facial recognition. But I read an article a few weeks ago, just a small little newsletter article about the software industry and their interactions with AI that I think has an interesting parallel. Talked about a major software company who was using AI to write code on a regular basis. So their lead architects who used to write really good code to do really clever things were kind of reduced to just being gatekeepers to make sure code that was written by AI tools didn't do any harm. And after a year of doing this, what they were finding were really good, creative software engineers were pulling the plug and moving out of the industry because they didn't feel like they were getting utilized in ways that made them feel good about themselves. And so there's this inadvertent leaking of talent from the organization because these tools were taking over the brunt of the work. I see that as an issue. Every client that we have really has come to us and said, give us your AI experience, show us what other people are doing, all that stuff. To be honest, I really think the innovative part of AI is really happening more at our customers. And I'd say from a dam perspective, the number one use case I kind of envision is we have all these assets organized and identified in this repository. And once they go through distribution channels, we kind of lose track of where they are. If AI can kind of close that loop, kind of what Ron was inferring when he was talking about, hey, I know that this has been pretty effective in these different areas. I think that will help. And that information gets back to those creative people. That will help drive the feedback loop that will drive the organization forward versus create it, throw it over the wall, and never really know how well that did.
From my perspective, I agree that the AI used within them started earlier than what the uh, today what we call AI is, right? It started with machine learning and all these object recognition type of stuff, speech to text, OCR, all those were already used, and we never trusted them, and we still don't trust them, right? The keywords it generates were terrible at the beginning. Now it's more okay, but how useful it is, as it tells you that it's all, it's a tree, it's a sky, it's blue sky, right? It doesn't give you that much value. I think the value can be combined with additional automations. I'm an integration guy, so I'm always pointing to that now. But if you can bring the data back into the dam, consolidate all that, I call it asset performance, the utilization of the asset, how did it perform out there? It's almost like a baseball player, that their value is uh, based on the strikes they did, the catches they've done, all those type of stats. So if you can bring impressions, likes, and those type of things out from there, and the sales of a product data based on the product media that you produced, bring that back into the dam and show that on the content. But it will be massive data. AI can play a big role in kind of getting a good actionable results out of that. So pulling the data, and that's the problem with the dam technology now, that AI is not able to quickly traverse through that data currently, because it's all sitting in this relational databases that are not super fast for AI to look at a large scale. But as things change and as people start adding, similar to how full text search happened maybe a decade or more ago, if AI based vector searching type of indexing happens with the systems faster, maybe AI can pull a lot more intelligence out of your data and start showing you this kind of styling, this kind of assets produced you a lot more results. So focus in that area and start being the sidekick for your creative teams, right? Because like I use AI as my sidekick to write documents because I hate writing documents. But if the creative people can use that to do their research by asking them, I'm going to work on this product within this context, what type of content or what type of styles I should be using to produce me the best results. And if that data is in there and AI can produce the results back, I think that will give a lot more value. There is also other aspects of AI people are putting together, kind of a quality check, verifying if your metadata is complete, if the naming of the asset matches the metadata it has been assigned. So there is that type of stuff also, but you can implement those using standards programming, right? It's all based on rules and other things.
Right.
So the value will be when humans are not able to evaluate massive amounts of data, look at it at a higher level, big scale. I think AI will produce a lot more in those areas.
Awesome. So then, how much more difficult does conveying the value of AI make, I don't want to just say damn selling, but like implementing a damn solution when AI, I'd imagine, is part of every discussion now, because um, the consideration might be, oh, if we adopt AI, I can get rid of my asset librarian because AI will just do it. We don't. It'll solve all of our silo data because AI will just do it. Um, I haven't seen personally. I haven't seen an instance where AI has replaced that institutional knowledge that exists with the people who understand what they're producing and how things operate. Um, but doesn't that make the conversation a little bit more complicated for you guys on the operational side and on the sales side to convey this message to the people who maybe it's IT who are just looking to get to the numbers and check boxes and be like, okay, this meets all of our requirements from a logistics standpoint. But Ron's on the side of like, is it really operationally going to move the needle? Like, is it more complicated now that AI is part of this thing because there's perceptions of what the value is going to be or what's going to happen almost immediately because AI is just solving when it's a lack of understanding, right? So do you guys have to bring that to the table in these discussions to kind of lower expectations and get them to realize what that looks like really, as opposed to like, it's an AI dam, we're saved?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little closer on the creative team side, right? And surely we've started empowering those teams with AI tools, standard LLMs, or other generative AI tool sets. I think there's an expectation like, well, they've been trained last week, so why are we not seeing 2x the assets this week, right? And so there's certainly that learning curve, and I don't think in some cases like dam, at least I've not really seen it like equated with like an AI generative, like this is the dam is going to produce things for us, more than, hey, there's probably some other systems around the dam now, like a content management platform, right, that will have more of that role and connect into the library, and or, hey, within the CMP, I've stood up a task, create this thing, I upload that into the task, and when it's completed and finalized, then it pushes into dam, right? So I think there's some expectations like, well, these other tools around the dam platform are starting to embed more of these AI capabilities, but again, they're very limited, and it's at this point in time they're just starting to get into that space. And again, I think there's a lot of hype and versus what the reality is, what those systems are capable of at the moment. There's a bit of disconnect there, and certainly we need to raise that with executives and team members who think you turn on this content platform and 2 months it's producing half your assets, and that's not necessarily the case.
Good.
Yeah, I
In
would throw
some cases.
one thing I'd add to what Ron said. We recently had a question about generative AI in the state of New York. Just recently passed a regulation around that, and specifically synthetic performers. I'm using that all the time now in conversation. And it's not, from a dam perspective, it's not about creating these Gen AI objects or actors. It's about identifying them and making sure that as they are utilized within the state of New York, that they're identified. And, from a customer, from our client's perspective, it's about exposure, right? They don't want anything to get through the pipeline where someone stripped out a watermark or, relied on metadata that got stripped out or something, but made it into the market and then exposed them to those fines. So in some ways, the role for digital asset management is kind of flipped in that we now need to be the protectors of content to protect the company, similar to what we have been forced to do with talent releases, intellectual property, licensing, things like that. So while I think we still have a play in some generative stuff, it's not in replacing creative people. It might be in supplanting some of their options, but I think it's going to be a bigger play as New York, probably California, obviously like Europe, GDPR, we're going to have to accommodate these regulations and requirements on a global scale in these centralized repositories. Because once it leaves the dam, it's really, really hard to manage in a distributed platform where you don't have that centralized um, place to go to figure out, what's right and what's wrong.
Hmm. Have you encountered anybody who has or any company who has tried to leverage their AI in the dam to identify waste in that regard? Like, is anybody taking a deep dive, kind of looking at the obvious would be duplicate assets, right? But like, assets don't meet the metadata minimally viable kind of attribution, like non-brand compliant assets. Like, is anybody kind of looking at it from that standpoint? Have you guys heard of anybody kind of looking at it, kind of not so much on the way in, but looking at and evaluating what we already have? It's kind of like dumping the duplicate images on your iPhone, right?
Yeah. I think everyone's talking about it. I don't know. I don't have anyone doing it, but everyone's
I
talking.
think one vendor started AI-driven brand compliance
Okay.
feature. Uh, I'm not giving names, I can,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's
I'd imagine it's
slowly.
complicated to implement, right? It's not, again, it's not you turn the AI on and it just does stuff. There's work there attached to this.
Right, right. You have to teach the AI, this is your brand, this is your competitors, maybe. They need to also, like if you're Nike doing a commercial and then background, there is a guy walking around with a hat with the Adidas logo. It should be able to detect that and say, no, you shouldn't be doing this in the commercial. These type of things are what they are checking, and that needs to be explained to the AI that these are the rules, these are your guidelines. How well that is put into production, I don't know yet, but that's where people want to gain efficiency for the review cycles, so that the first checks are happening with the AI. I mean, I recently had a prospect come to us and said, I'm doing a lot of real estate brochures, and all these real estate brochures that relate to a home needs to be compliant with the listing and with the rules. We can't say certain things. We can say certain things, right? So they taught these skills to the AI, and then they're now comparing as their work is being done, a full-time employee running checks on these and doing reviews on produced content, and then AI is doing the same thing on the side, and they compare and they see almost a good uh, one-to-one match between what the human is doing to AI is doing, and sometimes better than the human, because AI doesn't miss anything. So for the review cycles, it is accelerating it. Still, the work goes back into the creative person to complete the
Mm-hmm.
full final product. But the review cycle is accelerated. It takes a minute to get the feedback, and then it immediately goes back. So that is going to probably add a lot of efficiencies in terms of making sure things are compliant, making sure you follow the style guidelines, the brand guidelines, and nothing is going to cause us any headaches in the future. So those type of checks, any styling, how good it looks, how well it will perform, that's still a human touch. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So that seems like that could be a potential good metric to start, accounting for, right? It's time to market with approved creative, right? So you're not removing the human part of this, the human touch part of this, the human approval part of the workflow but you're trying to adopt the AI for what it's known to be proficient at, in that whatever it could be, right? An agent or just a whatever it is, an implementation.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
The compliance is a big driver for this because those rules are very well written in government documents and various other policies. So you can feed those into the AI and it will apply those 24/7, right? No stopping there, which is better than waiting for somebody to show up, make that check, spend the time, and your job is accelerated significantly. But the last checks should always be happening by a human at the end.
Awesome.
And I think you're even starting to see some of that outside of a dam, like in project management systems, right? I know Adobe Workfront is starting to incorporate that sort of brand review, and it's I believe it's strictly based on imagery at the moment, but over time it's probably tone of voice and those sort of things. But then it's on the company to actually teach the system, like, hey, these are our brand guidelines and our mandatories and compliance things that we need to cover. So yeah, I think you're seeing it inside dam as well as outside of dam.
So relative to kind of compliance and kind of cultural shift and change management, Ron, it's just so familiar. It seems like identifying those kinds of capabilities and bringing to the table those metrics should kind of be a value to get the creatives and those stakeholders to understand that that a very focused implementation in whatever regard it may be, if it's compliance, if it's regionality for localization, kind of plays a role, but you still got to build trust in the fact that the output's right, or the output's solid enough that it has a place. Have you guys had to start kind of having those discussions in order to kind of gain alignment and kind of gain trust in order to kind of help make this change happen, help make this shift happen?
I don't think we haven't yet started leveraging a dam or another platform for that sort of compliance, like
Okay.
guardrail. It's been mostly human, all human at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And these individuals understand the brand. They've been working with our partners, clients, over time, and so they understand what they can and can't do in those cases. And not to say that's infallible. Certainly, there's things that slip through the cracks. And I think eventually, I think the creatives would certainly benefit and be interested in something that could be their secondary eyes on something like this, right? That they could feed their piece of creative in, and within a minute get at least some directional, like, oh, it matches everything, you're good, and be able to move on. But again, I've not seen this actually in practice yet, like leveraging a system for this and doing it reliably. And so I think it's definitely in our future. We just need to think about what it's going to take to get there.
Bulan, John, have you guys seen it in action just yet?
I haven't seen it in action, but I was thinking as Ron was talking, we have a client who has, I think, 180,000 employees worldwide. And we work with the marketing team that manages the brand identity. And they have, I don't know, maybe a dozen divisions around the world. And trying to police that has been, really, really hard for the 10 years we've been working with them. The argument is if I can police it and I can require people to follow our brand and respect those guidelines, if I give them a place where they can go and trust that what they're looking at is current and acceptable. Once you build that out, then the question comes back to, okay, there's no excuse now. Everyone has access to this. How do I police this on a workforce, made up of 180,000 people? Well, this is really where AI is the only option, right? Because you can't forget about monitoring everything worldwide, including places like China. the scale is too broad. But if you're a really strong international brand, also the risk is kind of high because you really don't want people going off brand, not because they are lazy or they don't care, but because they have other drivers for their success. And, in a way, you want to introduce AI, you want to make people aware because at the long run, it'll make them successful and make the company successful.
Great. Bulant, anything to add?
I haven't seen anything in production yet.
No.
Yeah, nothing, but I think it's coming
Yeah.
slowly. Yeah, it will be there. There is no escape because internally we use AI significantly now. Software is now going there. Translations is another one.
Mhm.
All the different languages. So we know AI follows the rules. We know AI can handle languages very well, programming languages, typical languages. So all those are getting very mature that you're almost letting those go on their own in many cases. But when it comes to these creative areas, generative AI, it's a little getting, it is getting good enough, but that good enough may not be perfect, right? In almost everything, you cannot leave your company to 80% success, right? So that's not going to happen. So there will always be a human until it starts showing itself in certain areas that it can handle 100%. But will humans let that go and say that, okay, I'll let it run wild on this? I don't know when that will happen, but it's coming quick. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so too. One last quick thing, and what came to mind for me was given all your experiences and us talking about these invisible costs. Can you think of like one telltale sign that's like, wait, something's not right here, or we're not doing something as efficiently as possible? Ron, is it hours? Is it headcount? Bulant, is it utilization on the back end? You start seeing numbers kind of fall off. John, is it just like the lack of interactivity, is the lack of sessions, a lack of growth? Look, what do you guys each kind of immediately look at in a client or in a situation where you can, at this point in your careers, kind of spot that there's an inefficiency there that you can put your finger on relatively quickly?
I'll go first because I'm interested to hear what Ron has to think about what I'm going to say. I think that one not surprising thing is, I can assess a client pretty easily by looking at metrics around search, uploads, those kind of basic damn metrics. You can get a feel for how engaged the organization is. But what's really astounded me in the last 5 years is how much I've come to realize that organizational success around digital asset management has a lot more to do with things that I used to practice 20 plus years ago when I was a director of production at a number of different places. Things like, continuous improvement, culture, do people know how to do things, simple things like evaluate the cost, unit cost, cycle time, opportunity cost, kind of traditional publishing, almost, financially driven metrics. Those to me tend to be more important. And I say important because I see them lacking, people's understanding of that. I think the thought that I'll build a dam and they will come is still out there, and people still believe that. And it really, people don't come. They do sometimes, but for the most part, they don't come. they they have to be pushed a little bit and convinced and sold on a story that as an evangelist or a sponsor, it's our responsibility to arm them with that.
Yeah, I think I agree, John. Like, if you build it, they typically won't come, or they'll come for a little period, right, and then drift off. I think it has to be tied to a bigger story. Like, where are these things being utilized? How are we measuring that? Performance, either through sales or utilization. And I think, I don't know if you guys are seeing, like, I don't know how many engagements you have that is just strictly a pure damn to store creative, and it's not pushing to somewhere, or it's not connecting to something, right? And I think those are probably far and fewer between. And I think, companies making that investment are probably in support of, tying it to some new CMS platform or some other e-commerce platform or whatever it is. So yeah, I agree. Like, there's a much broader story, and I think DAM is certainly critical in those stories, but as a supportive role to some degree, and ultimately in service of some other larger business outcome or benefit. And so, being able to tell that story and get buy-in from that across the organization is really the main challenge, I think, in these organizations.
And I always look at how organized things are, because when you realize things are falling apart in a dam, people are not using it, they sidestep the processes and they sidestep dam. Either none of the latest stuff is in there anymore, they are all in shared drives and other things, or people put the content in but no metadata is there. It's just very unorganized. Everything is done kind of, I just did it to check a checkbox, but nothing else. So those are the things. Once you see that unorganized environment, you say this dam is going down the drain if nobody steps in and brings that back up. Is not easy to pinpoint to number of logins or those type of things, but it is pretty easy also to see if you had a good run and then suddenly slowly you see a dip in number of downloads, number of logins. It's kind of the indicator of things are not going well. But what we talked at the beginning about the ownership, the governance, those type of things are going to get things to the best performing state. And then if you add AI and asset performance metrics and all those things, it will shine your dam. So there's a lot of work. It looks very simple, like people say, I built the dam, it's running, people will come and use it. That doesn't happen. It's very rare that it happens.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thanks for sharing your insight, your valuable experience. Really appreciate it. For those of you who enjoyed this Santa Cruz software podcast, please feel free to subscribe, like, and share, and we'll see you on the next one.